Yes.
Okay, good.
All
Hi,
right.
everybody.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Welcome to our live session on Facebook, RepairWorks Live. We're talking about furniture finishing here in the wood shop.
My name's Ash,
I'm Shane.
and Luke's on the
I
camera.
think you might have just started then, sorry.
I just started.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
Hello.
Luke.
We'll do that
it's
again. That's
started
fine.
already.
Do you want to do it again?
No, I don't.
What are we doing here this morning?
We're going to be
Sorry, guys.
talking about wood finishing, essentially, which is like, it's kind of a big topic and a very intimidating topic, I think, to a lot of people.
Shane is a real whiz. When did you get into woodworking? Would you say
Six years ago? Yeah.
And
I mean, I used to do set building and stuff ages back, and props and things like
it's
that.
like MDF.
Well, we did a lot of ply and timber.
Nice.
But I got really into furniture work about 5 or 6 years ago.
And particularly finishing and conserving old timbers.
One of the things that I found was that, there's all sorts of advice and really good advice out there on using tools and cutting and sewing and making things. But in terms of furniture finishing and what finishes are and how they work and what to choose when, it seemed like there was a big hole in terms of information, and a lot of people weren't sure, and people often in the professional community just like use the thing that they've been using for 20 years because that's what they know. And so because I'm weird, I got really obsessed with that. Like, this is something that I don't know and other people don't seem to know. So I got really into trying to figure it out.
Lots of trial and error.
I feel really like top showy. Is it coming up? No, I don't like it.
No, that's good. This is the expert, and I'm the lay person. And he will be teaching me everything that I say, and you can watch along, I think.
We
maybe.
should say, by the way.
And maybe I could offer some input as well from my little, little amounts of experience.
We should say.
So I mean, and yeah, I'll do my bio as well. So I've just been mucking around.
Do it.
It's not all about Shane all the time.
Good.
Or Luke, finally. And so I've just been mucking around, making furniture the past sort of year or so, I guess. And
you have some sort of knowledge and training in something.
And yeah, we're making furniture. And
Furniture that's gone into the design centre to be displayed.
Yeah, that's true. Actually,
He's got a piece that's been accepted potentially
workshop
into the workshop
2020
at the Australian Design Centre,
which is coming up end of this month. I think we put it in. So I mean, I've been making stuff, and there's a bit of trial and error. I will put on certain finishes and realise it's a pain. You strip it back off again, put something else nicer on. There's a table I did the other week, which was a mid-century thing, and you see a lot of the mid-century stuff with the veneer on top.
Yeah.
A lot of it sort of gets worn out, and Shane lent me these great, what are they, pigments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Adding them to try to sort of match
the
surfaces, match the colours and stuff, which is really interesting.
Yeah. We're going to be covering, like, the very basics, because a lot of what we do here and a lot of what I do is working on old pieces and getting a finish that's maybe a bit worn or had some bad work done to it or something, getting it alive again and clear and clean and happy.
Yeah.
But that can be a bit tricky, and it helps if you're going to be doing any of that to have a really basic understanding first of what finishes are, how they work, what the different things are, and then once you understand them, reworking them is a lot easier, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I do want to mention we have a slightly new setup today. We got some fancy new equipment, thanks to Andre, who helped sort us out. So we can now do these sweet little like wipes.
Oh, we can't see it coming.
Yeah.
Oh,
so we're like now the quality of a local community TV show, which is very exciting. So enjoy our nice close-ups and wipes.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be covering some basic finishes. I want to talk about why we put finishes on stuff. I want to talk about what the differences are between them in a very a top level kind of way. I don't want to get into the real details of
like
what
the scientific
this
words.
Yeah, and
what
also
are some of the words you said before?
Thermoplastic and thermosetting.
I was going to say isotopes, but that's because it's written in the toilet here. So I don't know what an isotope is. Do you know?
No.
Thermoplastic isotopes.
Thermoplastic isotopes. No. We won't be going into that.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid.
But what I want to, like, when you go to the store, you go to Bunnings or something, there'll be a whole row of this floor varnish and this one and this one and this one. It seems like there's so many. I'm not going to break down. We're not going to talk about what the differences are between them, and there aren't actually a lot of differences between them.
It's like the toothpaste on the shelves.
Yeah, you have so many, but they're all roughly the same thing. What I want to do is just kind of break them down into some of like the 5 or 6 that we have here, and use those as a basic. ask questions throughout this. Chuck questions in the comments. We'll try and get to them when we can. It can be quite confusing, and if there's something you want to see again, or for us to go over a little bit more, definitely.
I wonder if we could give them a prompt at home for a question. Like, I just had a thought that I think some of my family might be watching, and I know Mum recently, she had these table chairs, and she wanted to refinish them, and maybe like if you could ways in which to identify old finishes at home, or like particularly if they need to be redone, what would need to be done to them.
And we'll talk about that. So that's what I'm talking about again, where I say I think if we start on a raw piece of timber, this one, which we're gonna test some finishes on, and we talk about what these finishes are, understanding what they are helps you to be able to understand when you see them later on. I think that's really key. So when we'll try and cover that as we go. That's a really good point, because that is something that's really hard. You pick up an old piece of furniture, and you don't necessarily know what's on it. It's just got something, and it is very, very helpful. Yeah. Do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Do I need to set comment moderation onto something to receive questions?
No, you don't.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's it.
Good question.
That's a good audience question.
That's from Luke. He's just,
this is his first time behind the camera.
Having a hard time not being in front of the camera.
All right, should we
get
started? So, finishes. So in general, the main concept is you have a piece of wood or a piece of furniture. You've shaped it to whatever shape you want it to be, and now you've got to put something on it to protect it, but also to bring out some of the beauty of the piece of timber, if that's what you choose. That tends to be the most basic. Like, you're gonna have food on it. You're gonna potentially use it, wear it down. Putting some sort of protective coating on it does help make the timber last a little bit longer, and that's probably the primary reason for putting a finish on stuff.
Like resisting moisture?
Resisting moisture, because moisture soaks in, and it'll also pull in like dirt and grime, like all sorts of other stuff into the wood as well. So if you have some sort of coating over your timber, that's easier to clean than the wood, which is porous and sucks stuff up. So if you get dirt or something on your coating on top of your piece of wood, that can be cleaned off a lot easier later on. So that's the number one reason why coatings are on. The number two reason is aesthetic.
And they smell really nice sometimes.
No,
I touched on this,
you did.
didn't I?
And I'm not really sure why.
You know when you walk into a room that's like a nice furniture shop,
yeah,
and it just smells really nice.
That's because they have recently probably pulled out a thing of wax and they want it to smell nice.
Well, it's like
it only smells when you're applying it, and then that smell eventually goes away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a trick in antique stores to get you to be like, It's also the same in a wood shop. Like, they'll just cut a piece of oak or pine or something so it smells like wood when you walk in.
That's great.
Yeah.
What about the waxes that smell really, really nice?
Yeah, so you'll have waxes with like
honey,
lemon and honey and stuff in them. Yeah. That is lovely when you use it and when you hand it back to the person.
And
but
it goes as well.
A month
unless you
later,
push your nose into like the surface of the table.
Well, the thing about anything that smells is it's something coming off the surface and into our nose. So eventually it all will go away. So those nice smelling products only exist for like the first month, maybe.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I've learned today. That's great.
The second reason that we put finishes on stuff is to make it look really nice. And that's when you're deciding if you're working on a new piece of furniture or something, you have a choice. Almost any finish will do something and protect it. What you want it to look like is your choice. Do you want it to be shiny like a French polish? Do you want it to have a very woody feel? Do you want it to be dull? Do you want it to be glossy? There's no right answer to any of that. That's all in personal preference and something to think about. But we'll talk about that a little bit as we go forward.
Nice.
For the most part, the main property you need with a finish that we've kind of come up with as people is it's got to go on as a liquid, or it's got to be able to go onto the surface, and it's got to end up being hard at some point. That's probably the most common feature of any of these. So all of these things that we have are something that can be softened enough to be able to go on as a liquid and eventually end up hard. And that's seems really stupidly simple, I think, but like it's really important. And it's why, for instance, when we get to it, we're going to talk about oils. Certain oils are good for going on furniture and certain oils are not good for going on furniture because some will end up hardening and some will not. And you want to make sure you use the type that will end up hard. But that's primary thing number one with finishes. And then you also want them to be waterproof, you want them to be durable, you want them to be cleanable, and that's the thing. In terms of that aspect of it going from a liquid to being a solid, there are two categories.
Go on.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
This is where we get into thermoplastic and thermosetting.
You were
But I'm
just
going to
like
use different terms.
freaked out.
I
That's
did.
fine. I'll ask questions for the people if I don't
Yeah.
understand.
I'll just quickly touch into it because we could go on about this for really long.
Apparently,
This side here, we're going to call this our drying or evaporative.
yeah,
Finishes?
sure.
And then this side here, we're going to say these are curing or chemically hardening
Right.
finishes.
It's interesting that you have this oil here with these ones. Anyway,
Yeah. The main thing here is that, so with shellac, which we'll get, I think, our first close-up of the day. Whoosh. So with shellac, this is your shellac flake, right? What shellac is it's a natural resin created by a beetle, the lac beetle. They leave it on they kind of eat it out of the branches of a tree. I can even put some out on the bench here if that helps.
And this is the material. This is it. This is the
That's it.
Yeah,
So the lac beetle secretes that onto the tree. We then remove it with scraping and solvents, and it ends up like this. It's not actually made out of beetles. That's the number one thing that people always say it's beetle wings or something else. It's actually just it's It's sort of,
but
it's a different thing that the beetle excretes.
Excretes.
Yeah.
Um,
So what happens with it? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just interesting, like when you say, I just picture a bunch of people walking around some trees and scraping things off. What do you think that they've got these beetles in, like on some sticks that are easier to...
Traditionally, I mean, it's like any other orchard or farm sort of thing.
Yeah.
You've got all these types of trees that the beetles like, and then you often break the branches off. Well, you don't, I don't. Somebody does somewhere. They scrape the material off. It's got bits of stick and bits of other stuff in it. And then you go through a process of distilling and refining that until you just get this. And what you get, the way this works is obviously that's solid. So you want to dissolve this. Ooh, is this what you want, Luke?
Yeah.
So you dissolve this in a solvent, in this case alcohols, like methylated spirits. You put it on the surface of your piece of furniture or piece of timber. The methylated spirits evaporate into the air, and you're left with this sitting on the surface. So that's what that's the basics of these evaporatives. You take a plastic or a resin, you dissolve it in something, you put it on the surface, the solvent evaporates, and you're left with just that on the surface. And that's a really simple one. Shellac is great. It lives in that family. Wax also lives in that family. So a lot of soft waxes, they've had turpentine or something added to them as a solvent to soften them enough to be able to apply to the surface. And then that'll evaporate out, and you're left with it. That's the most simple. It's also, in restoration, we love shellac because you can kind of rework it later with alcohol, and you can kind of keep messing with it.
And so how long have people been using shellac for, do you know?
Shellac came in about the 1800s-ish, late 1700s maybe, in Europe. I don't know if it was around for too much longer. I know sandarac was another resin, and mastic, and all these other resins were around for a long time. But shellac came in late 1700s, I think, early 1800s, and then that's when kind of French polishing came in and that high shine. Because French polishing isn't a material in and of itself, it's a way of applying shellac, which we'll talk about a little bit later today. And then you've got some synthetic, like this is a painting varnish, which is very similar. It's a resin in a solvent, you put it on, the solvent evaporates. So that's why I call them drying or evaporative coatings. Then the other ones over here are, actually, this one would be, this one's sort of in the middle. Anyway, these ones cure through a chemical process. So your linseed oil and a lot of your oils are in that realm. You put the oil on the surface, and it is what it is, it's oil, but it interacts with the air to eventually harden. I think that's where I'm gonna stop at that point.
And the oils stay on the surface as opposed to soaking in.
But they do, because, I mean, wood is porous and it sucks stuff up. So the oil, because it's the liquid itself that goes hard, the oil goes all the way and penetrates into the timber, and then it goes hard. Whereas with some of the solvent stuff, what will happen is the solvent might go in but leave the resin on the surface.
So shellac would stay on the surface.
It's more likely to sit up on the surface rather than an oil which will penetrate and then harden.
Yeah, I guess recently I've been thinking about finishes, things soaking in and things staying on the surface, and they've been these two things that defining them as opposed to
Yeah, the thing though is that if your first coat of oil is the one that's going to soak in. Once that goes in and hardens, your next coat of oil is going to sit on top of that and harden, and you can actually build up a really thick oil coating if you want, just by adding layer on layer on layer. You need to keep them really thin, is the main thing. If you're layering anything, thinner coatings are better, and you can picture why. Like if I did a really thick coating of shellac, the risk there is that the spirits at the bottom of that won't properly evaporate.
Right.
Or same with if you do a thick coating of oil,
Yeah.
the stuff at the top will harden and the stuff underneath might not harden properly. So thin coats of anything are always going to be better.
But methylated spirits evaporates
really quickly. Yeah. So that's the nice thing about shellac. You can do a shellac finish like we'll do today, which is why we're focusing on it mostly, and it'll evaporate really quickly. Yeah.
We have a question. Jennifer Coombs
Hi, Jennifer.
asks, what about taking shellac off 100-year-old furniture?
Don't do it.
And what to then finish the furniture with? A natural oil or wax?
I'm curious why you would want to take the shellac off the 100-year-old furniture.
If it's patchy or something, I guess.
Okay.
Like this thing here. I mean, we have this old little. How old's that? We've got a cabinet in the Bower workshop, which is quite old.
Yeah,
It's a
rosewood.
bit patchy though, isn't it? Or it's got little different bits.
Yeah, I think my instinct is always to clean it first.
Yeah.
Which I do want to say, if you're working with old furniture, I would avoid removing the coating that's on there. If it's lasted a really long time, it'll continue to last. If you can clean the grime and stuff and get a nice clear coating on top, and just put a wax over it, that's often better. I work with another restorer who said he'd been in the industry for 12 years restoring old furniture without ever stripping or sanding anything back, because he was able to work the surface, get it beautiful just by cleaning it, or with a shellac surface, reworking it.
Right.
So if possible, I would avoid removing it. If you absolutely had to, for some reason, or you just really, really wanted to, although if it's a 100-year-old, please be a little bit thoughtful, because we don't have so many of these, and it's nice to make them last as best as possible. Alcohol will help, will pull it off, or a paint stripper will remove it.
Right. But yeah, the strippers.
The strippers are pretty nasty, though.
Yeah. But if she's certain that it's got a shellac finish on it,
Yeah,
and you start with like a metho, maybe try to blend it all a bit, and then
that's what I will often do. Is I will try and rework a shellac surface, especially considering. So, if you're thinking about removing it anyway, right? Try a few things first. Try cleaning it, see if that works. Try reworking that surface, maybe really fine sandpaper and some metho to kind of move it around. And if that doesn't work, you're just back to where you started anyway.
There could be some colouring issues as well, maybe. Like if things sit in the sun, the bits where the sun.
So she's commented it is appearing patchy, so she's trying to fix that.
Yeah. I would probably look to cleaning it thoroughly, using some detergent and soap, or even turpentine. To mineral turp.
Sugar soap?
Clean
Sugar
it off.
soap's a bit heavy duty? Or?
Sugar soaps potentially can damage the shellac.
Yeah.
So cleaning it off with something a little bit more gentle, getting rid of any wax, and then reworking it with metho and sandpaper first, or doing like another light coat of shellac in a method I'll talk about later.
Right.
It's hard and it doesn't always go well, but why not try? Like that's always.
And what about
Is it worth touching on the difference between terps and metho as well? Because I think some people get them confused.
I will be we'll discuss that. What were you saying?
what was I going to say? I was going to say, just as I touched on earlier, doing the colouring. Just some sun damage, and you might have like lines where you might have had a cloth over something, and the sun's got to it a lot. I use these pigments, which seemed like a professional way to do it.
Yeah.
But there are any other things you could use to maybe colour surfaces?
I mean, there are professional stains and stuff, but I don't really want to get down into. We should probably do another segment later on about working old finishes.
Yeah.
And doing stuff like that. I'd love to do color at another point.
Yeah. So, but she needs some shellac and some metho.
Yes.
And I will go through it.
Yeah, we will. But basically, what you're saying is you mix in a little bit of pigment to get color into that to fix the patch.
So you can't use oil paint or anything. No.
We'll get into this in another day. It's a whole other subject, all that. And so we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But I do want to say, and that's another thing. If you want a little bit more, we do these one-on-one consultations that you can book on our website. So we can sit down for 15 minutes, and I can, or Ash can, or someone can talk to you one-on-one and I can look at the piece, or we can look at the piece, and we can decide what's best.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit better.
Yeah, because you'll have your camera on, we can see it, and it doesn't cost you anything.
Well, it's a gold coin. It's a $2 gold coin.
How do you donate $2 over the computer?
Online shopping.
And so you just
You should book
transfer
it online, like you
$2.
book anything.
Oh, and you pay with your credit card.
Yeah.
Wow, $2.
You've not bought anything
Put it in
online.
the USB slot.
So it's not really a gold
You just put the money
gold
in.
coin donation.
Jennifer
But like,
says thank
we
you.
kind of know. Yeah.
Yeah, good. I do want to press forward though.
Yeah.
So the main thing to know is that you've got your kind of oil finishes and you've got your ones that dry chemically. Once they harden pretty permanently, so they can't be reworked as easily. And then you've got your ones that are dissolved and then go.
That's all the trial and error that I've been talking about. Using these things
Mm-hmm.
and then realizing that they're a pain and sort of going backwards. Well, not the oil, but the
Some of those ones.
Yeah.
There's another category which I'm not going to talk about. This is all your water-based stuff. But that's a different thing, and it's not relevant. So I'm not going to go into that.
Can you explain what's a water-based what?
So with this one you have.
Just quick.
Okay,
Can
so
you
with this one
summarize?
you've got stuff that's dissolved in a solvent, and that one's stuff that's chemical. A lot of these things won't, because they're waterproof. That's the point. We want them to be waterproof. They don't go into a water well, but there are ways to make some things mix with water, like by using soaps or something like that. So then, like acrylic is a good example of this. Acrylic paints is these tiny little bits of acrylic that are floating in a water emulsion. It's not like it's dissolved in it.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
that's why I didn't want to go into it.
That's good. I believe you more now.
Hopefully, someone got something out of that.
Yeah.
I do. So, what we should do though is let's make some shellac really quickly, so that we can see kind of how that works. What I've got my fancy science equipment.
You're
here.
going to use that, are you?
I am totally.
So someone could just use a cup and a spoon
Yeah.
at home?
Basically, we're gonna get the shellac to dissolve in alcohol.
Yep.
That's basically what we're doing.
Yep.
Can you?
And by alcohol, you would mean methylated spirits.
In that case, methylated spirits. So that's what Luke was saying before. The difference between methylated spirits and terps is like. So methylated spirits is in the alcohols family, and terps is more in the oils family. So they're just very different things. Terps will interact with waxes and greases and oily things, whereas alcohol will interact with not those as well. But metho is the one, or alcohols are the one for shellac. Can I get you to give me 100
Yes. Sure, I can.
grams of shellac?
Shellac, 100.
That's
kinda
going to stay there. That's going to stay there.
That's going to stay right
Get a
there.
nice little close up.
100.
In the meantime, I'm going to put 400.
Where are we zooming in on, Luke? Are we zooming in on my hands?
We're not zooming in yet when
No,
the
no, no.
action starts.
Is
But
it
yeah,
on us?
I'm just getting that little bottle in the thing.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Once you start.
Where's my weight? Here.
So
This
your basic cut for shellac when you're getting started, if you're going to make it, is about a 1-to-4 ratio. 1 part shellac,
I see.
4 parts methylated spirits. So I'm putting 400 milliliters of methylated spirits in my, I'm just going to call it a science bottle.
Wow. 100 grams is a lot, though, right?
Yeah,
Sure, that's what you want?
that's what I want.
What do you want, 100?
And this is what's referred to as a weight to volume solution.
Did
So
you want
now you know
100,
that.
100 mils? Is it 100
Oh, no.
grams?
Did you?
Yeah, take it off.
Yeah.
So,
See? Yeah, take it off.
you've messed with the, no, because...
Oh, the
Think you want
tear.
it?
Tear.
Tear.
Tear, okay.
Tear.
Sorry, everyone. 100 grams.
And this is the bit that you probably don't have, but I love nonetheless.
Oh, that's the money shot, isn't it?
Are you getting that in close up?
I was getting that.
Ooh, now we're going over to here.
Yeah, no.
Are you sure? Shane, you sure?
Yeah. Stop there. That's fine.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Do you want to turn that off and start again, Shane, so we can just see the magic?
So when I've done this before, I mean, so what would you call this 1 to 4? It's got a name, like your body or your...
This is referred to as
Your
a
mother?
2-pound cut. Because
2
it's
pound
traditionally 2 pounds of shellac to 1 gallon of alcohol.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I have spoke to other gurus as a guitar maker,
Yeah.
and his ratio was a lot lot more metho.
Yeah.
I was surprised by people just pouring so much metho in.
This
I think
is
that they came to, or like a way for me to understand was that it looked like slightly unhealthy urine.
kind of like. So this is a really thick.
So that's
cup.
I don't. Yeah, that's not healthy at all.
No. So this is very unhealthy urine.
Yeah, okay. If that's possible.
This is what we call a stock cut. So
Stock,
you
okay.
wouldn't necessarily use this depending on what you were doing. This is going to be really thick.
Yeah.
And then you dilute that down from there into what you want from there.
And I guess if if you're doing the woman at home who wrote in, she obviously wouldn't need to mix this much, right? She was just doing it.
No, and you can buy some pre-done as well. So I'm going to get my stirrer because I'm
That's fantastic.
lean, and I want that. And I'll just start to add this in, a bit by bit.
That is good television, guys.
So has that got heat in there as well?
No, there's no heat on this one. I don't want to light the alcohol on fire, so we're just mixing it up. And you can do this pretty much by getting a bottle and shaking it up or regularly stirring it.
Yeah, you want to put it in an old Vegemite jar or something, and you can shake it.
The drill trick's a good one as well.
Yeah, we put sometimes before I had this, would put a drill and a vise slightly on, constantly mixing up a pot of this sort of stuff all the time. Something to note: old shellac won't dissolve. So if you found some old shellac in the shed,
Well, that's interesting.
it will have aged in such a way that it won't dissolve anymore. And you'll do this, and you'll be doing this for hours, and you'll see no change. And that's a good sign that the shellac is old, and that you should probably get some new shellac.
I think I've had that problem.
Yeah, I've had that one. We've had that here because we work with a lot of donated stuff all the time. So
Yeah, I actually found
that.
a ton of shellac at the Bower in Marrickville, which is a nice shop. If you haven't been, you should go visit. It's really cool. And I will dissolve and I'll metho, like the ratio, a lot more metho, and it'll still just be sitting there at the bottom.
And I think that might be the case with this stuff in this tank. We'll find out.
Okay.
Yeah, we might notice that. I've already got some pre-mixed anyway that we'll be using today.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to walk through. If you're doing this, I think it's nice to just add a little bit, shake it up until that dissolves, add a little bit more, shake it up until that dissolves, rather than putting it all in one go. That just takes a really long time, I think. So I'll let this go for a while, and then I'll switch it over. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm
still just that's so much more to put in.
It's a really thick cut, the first one, and you don't have to necessarily use that. So what we'll do after that is we'll put it down to, we'll take this and we'll dilute that with much more metho before we go in, which is what we've got over here. So I've already got what we call, so that's our stock solution here.
Yep.
And then we've got a brush mix,
Uh-huh.
and then a polishing mix.
Ah.
So with our brush mix, we add, you can do like 50-50. So 50-50 stock to metho, and that's pretty good for brushing. And then you want to refine that down even thinner for a polishing mix.
Sure.
Which is your more French polishing mixture.
50-50.
Yeah, 50-50.
I'm just trying to think of the ratio. Then the
so that
ratio
ends up being...
becomes, so what was that? 1 to 4? Then it becomes like
1 to 8. Yeah.
And then what was that one?
And then that one ends up being like 1 to 14 or 1 to 16 sort of ratio.
And that's what you polish with. 1 to 16.
That's what you polish with.
Maybe that's what I'm being told.
And often, I mean, as the thing about this sort of stuff is there is a science to it like this, but there's also an art to it.
Yeah.
So the people who've been using it for a really long time have found what works. And on a humid day it might work a little bit different than on a dry day. And there's a lot of things that come from experience.
Sure.
So definitely just try it.
Yeah.
If nothing else.
Even winter in Sydney versus summer in Sydney
would have a huge difference in how quickly it evaporated and how it worked on the surface and that sort of thing. So
interesting.
There are some things like that.
That
are working on it. On my board,
I've just noticed something as well. This is orange shellac. What is orange?
Orange shellac is your natural, so this is pretty much
straight, fresh from the tree.
Yeah, and that's the most common type. Some beetles will secrete on some trees a slightly paler one and that sort of thing, or it can be bleached artificially and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But this is your classic. It's orange, and it looks really orangey. But as you'll see, it doesn't necessarily tint the wood as much as you would expect. Which is something I hear people talk about a lot.
Or as much as oils and things, right?
Yeah, well, like linseed oil will darken it quite a bit. But I think we should test them.
Yeah, I know. I remember we've spoken about this board that Shane's prepared.
Yeah.
What have we got? 6 different finishes here, and then on the one piece, and we'll be able to see the differences of each oil. We probably wouldn't even need to say that much, would we? They could just look
Yeah.
at it.
We'll definitely see. We'll see as far as we get.
Yeah.
The first thing that we have to do with any piece of timber is we have to prep it, though.
Sure.
And that's sanding, which is my least favorite thing in the world to do.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's important. So what I'll do, say with this board that's pretty good, I'll start at about 240, which is this one, and I'll sand it.
And so for the people, someone who hasn't sandpapered before, the higher the grit of sandpaper, the finer it is, the smoother the finish. So I mean, generally you want to progress from a lower grit. What grit would you start on? 240. And you go
if it's already okay,
Yeah.
I'd probably start on 240.
You'd never go below 80 or anything, would you?
80 is just going to put some really deep scratches in it.
So even higher, like a 120 you'd start on. Maybe?
At the lowest. If you've got a nice piece if you've got an old piece, never really go below 240, to be honest. If you're working with something new, you might start at 1 something.
I guess, yeah, if we're focused on restoring, then you're just going to want...
But I just pulled this board out of the rack, and I'm going to start at 240. I think that's fine for what I'm doing.
And so this isn't the 240s come in the black, wet and dry looking stuff, or when does that start? It does.
No, you can get them in different types of sandpaper.
Okay.
Just experiment and try different things.
Yes.
And you'll notice here, one thing that I'm paying attention to is just being very systematic, making sure I'm evenly going across the whole surface as much as possible, and hitting everywhere evenly. I'm going to just brush off all that dust real quick. And your final product is never going to be right if you don't take the time to sand it properly.
And it's always frustrating when you're in a rush and you think, that'll do, and then you sand it, you start to put your finishes on, then you see that maybe you haven't done it, and it annoys you so much that you go back and you start again.
Yeah, that'll do is the enemy of refinement.
And being in a rush, I guess, isn't it? That's a bit
absolutely. Never do anything in finishing at the end of the day or the last thing.
Oh yeah.
Really get in ready to start your day doing it, or your period of time, because it's always going to be slightly frustrating. You're always going to want to be able to have the best eye as well.
Yeah.
Like if your eyes start to tire, it's going to be hard to see this little scratch here.
Another thing, like with stripping, if you're using a paint stripper, when you do that a little bit and you think, oh, that's enough, and then you have to spend so much time sanding, it's a pain as well.
Yeah.
So I guess doing each stage as much as you need to.
And very carefully. And yeah, it's like with anything in furniture or woodwork, being thoughtful, being present, and being careful about it. It's always going to yield the best results.
What grit have you gone through now?
So now I'm at 320.
Okay.
And this is where I'm actually going to stop for most of the board.
Here's a question for me. When you're using sandpaper, is it best to just be liberal with it and not be afraid of sort of chucking it out and getting another piece? I find that what you've just done with this sheet, 2 rounds of that board, and then it feels like it stops performing as well. Like if
absolutely.
Would you
at that point, if you look, can we have a look at that?
Sure can.
So what you can see is that's already starting to clog up. I can potentially clean some of that off. Flick it a little bit.
Oh yeah.
I can get that back to working, but there is a certain point where it just stops performing.
But they don't last that long, do they?
No.
But you can feel on the harder surface versus there, it feels different.
Yes,
yeah, no.
Absolutely. And you'll definitely, if you sit on this for a really long time, you get really frustrated. And when you switch back to a fresh piece, you'll notice immediately that you wish you hadn't spent all that time.
So just
on
use
the
the
other
one.
Yeah. Something I'm going to do here is I'm going to brush the sawdust off of these areas.
Oh yeah.
But I'm going to leave the sawdust on the area that I'm polishing.
Right.
And this is just something I do.
Is this a new thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
I just want to talk a little bit about it. And then in the area that I'm going to oil and put poly on, I'm actually going to jump up to 400 in that section as well. Shellac does really well and gets a nice finish. Ooh, it's raining. Gets a nice finish. Can you actually see them?
Of course I can. Where up to? Where am I going to?
Just these two.
Okay.
So oils, you want to, because it soaks in a bit more and it doesn't build as much up on the surface, you want to be able to, you want to sand it to a higher grit to get a more clean result. And it's the same with the end of a board. You definitely need to sand that end grain of any board to a much higher grit to get the same quality that we'll get out of this.
Right. How's that?
Yeah, it should be fun. Now,
You want the dust going on this as well, right?
yeah, I want the dust on this one.
So where are you going first on that little shellac there?
So I'm going to start over here. We're going to start with, I don't know if you can see that says Shellac B for brushing. This isn't mixing it. So actually, this is a really good example. First of all, you see how that's not really mixing it at all? The method is completely clear. That's a sign that that shellac is quite old.
Right.
So you want to get a newer shellac. The same process we went through will achieve a better result. You'll start to notice it mixing in.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that was our demo shellac, and the shellac that we've actually mixed up, which is mixed up. It looks like this.
Okay, which is probably dissolved. What about time? Because you meant to let shellac sit for 4 hours or something. But I mean, with your stirrer, it should have dissolved.
It's a matter of making sure that it's completely dissolved. That you don't have any chunks or little bits. So you want to leave it for a few hours mixing up, and maybe overnight, to make sure that as much of it dissolves and evenly throughout the method, and you don't brush it on and get a chunk here and there.
Also, with this dust that we've just done a bit of a light brush, would you go over with a metho and wet it first and wipe it off?
Yeah. One of the things that you can do is get a soft cloth.
Can you move that shellac thing away from so it's just out of the view of the... That's it.
Soft cloth?
Get a soft cloth, put a little bit of metho on that, or a tiny bit of shellac and extra metho, and wipe back over your surface to really get rid of any remaining dust. That's on there.
If you can blow it out in some way, if you have a blower or
absolutely. Something that I'll mention really quick here, one of the reasons why I'm doing this so strangely, there are a couple different results. So the result you get from your finish is not just the product you use, it's how it's applied as well. And there's two things that are important to know, and a lot more important than I realized until like a year ago, which is whether or not the grain is full or whether or not it's an open grain. And what that means is on your piece of timber, you can see those little pockets of pores in the wood.
Sure.
And if you leave it naturally, the finish will go on, and then there will be little divots where the pockets are. It'll look very natural timbery. If you look across and raking light on a piece of wood, if you can see those little pores and stuff, that's called open grain finish. Whereas if you fill that with something, in this case we're going to try and use the sawdust itself, to fill the pores here, you get a completely flat, much shinier, and in some cases more durable kind of finish.
Well, like on it,
not always.
Say with end grain,
yeah.
Could you do that?
Yeah, and in fact with end grain, you'll get a much cleaner, polished result if you take the time to fill that grain somehow. And there are loads of different ways to do it that I don't want to touch on. In this case, I'm going to attempt to just use the fine sawdust from the 320 paper, which works sometimes and sometimes it's terribly. I've got a brush here. This is a camel hair brush. You do want to have a nice quality brush when doing this. This is, it's your tool. You need a nice tool to do good work, right? And in this case, this brush here is my tool. And it's got to be nice. It's got to hold a certain amount of material, and it's got to release that material nicely. And in this case, the camel hair is really good. Squirrel hair is really good. And there are some synthetic versions of these as well that you can use if you don't want to. And I'm going to brush it on in this section here.
Ooh.
You see that every time I do this, I'm flipping it so that I'm going back and forth between which side of the brush I'm using.
Yep.
And I'm coming down at this kind of flatter angle.
Yep.
To make sure it stays a little bit more even.
Okay.
I don't want too much on here. I might even remove a little bit more from my brush and come back over that, because what I absolutely don't want is runs or drips or buildup in any way. One of the reasons why we thin it down so much is to reduce that, and then you also just want to have as little on your brush as possible to cover that surface. It does mean you need to do more coats.
Yep.
But that's fine. You get a much better result, and if you have the time.
I'm happy to lift that up to the camera.
Yeah.
A little bit further.
And because that's
a bit further, it's just getting catching the light. There we go. Beautiful.
Because it's metho, that's going to evaporate in about 30 seconds or so, enough to be able to do another coat.
Yeah, okay.
Which is great.
And will you try and vary, start from this end the next time? Or?
I'll always go with the grain direction.
Okay.
When sanding and brushing, I always try and work with the grain,
Yep.
especially when brushing, because if there are any slight imperfections, they'll be hidden more
Yeah.
in that grain.
How would someone identify the direction of the grain at home?
I mean, look for the long lines in the timber. In this case, if you look at it, let me have a look at that again. You can see that there are these kind of long grain lines going this way, and that's the direction that you want to go.
Okay.
Some pieces of wood will be a little bit weird in the help, whatever. Just follow the lines that you see.
Okay.
Essentially. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Good. And that's brushing with shellac, and that's really it. I'll do another coat here. Now that it's mostly it's pretty dry at this point, and I can come back and just do another coat of that. I'm starting this way. Often I would actually work across and off the other end there, but because I've got a hard line and I'm going off this end, you always work off the end.
Yep.
If I was to run on that edge, what you'll see is I'll get
drip running down.
drip running down.
Yep.
I'm not sure we're going to get to pulling, but we should get to the other ones.
Yep.
The next thing I want to do is a polish. So it's the same material, but we're going to use a different technique. And we're going to use the technique used in French polishing, which is a rubber. This is a rubber we made the other day for Luke. This is a big one. And the idea here is that essentially you've got a soft, absorbent kind of wad inside that's going to soak up your dissolved shellac.
And what is that wad made out of?
In best cases, it's cotton. But, I mean, this is an absorbent towel. You can use an old sock, pretty much anything that's going to suck that up.
Yeah.
Natural fibers are usually better than synthetic ones because they're just more absorbent. And then you put some sort of thin but not scratchy material over the top of that.
Yeah.
And that's just going to get you
And
the result.
lintless, is that how you would say it?
Yeah, definitely. Lintless. And you can, if you've got you can run a piece of cloth through the wash a few times, and that'll pretty much mean it's ready to go. And what I'll do is so now I'm going to go over to my rubbing mixture of shellac.
Okay.
And I'll use that.
Since you're 1 to 8?
Yeah, this is like 1 to 16 now.
Oh, this is 6. Oh, sorry.
So the brushing one was the 1 to 8.
Yeah.
This is like my 1 to 16, which I'm actually just going to brush onto my pad.
So that cloth in the middle, you don't get it wet first, I think.
There are so many ways of doing this.
Right.
Some people will open this up,
Yeah, get that.
and then they'll pour the shellac into the back here.
Yeah.
That way it's always filtering through the front,
Yeah.
which definitely makes sense, particularly historically, when you wouldn't be able to have this refined an
Right.
alcohol as this. But in this case, I just put it on the surface a lot.
Just a little bit. You barely put anything on there.
Yeah, when I'm starting, I don't really put a lot on. And I'll add more as needed.
Yeah. Okay, so you see the sawdust still just sitting in there?
Yeah. Now this board has some big chunks in it. So I'm putting some more on there. And the other thing here is I'm putting a lot of pressure down to try and make sure I don't have any bumps or runs.
Yeah.
And I'm working across the surface. I'm going in circles, and then I'm coming back in other directions, and then I always finish off with these long strokes like this.
The other day you were talking about the ghosting, which I found interesting.
So in doing this, you might add a little bit of an oil to this to make it move. That's totally starting to get into the realms of French polishing.
Right.
For this case, I'm just going to do this a little bit, and I'm just going to use the shellac, so you won't have that because there's no oil.
Yeah, I guess one thing when I've done this, I stress about how often I have to keep applying the shellac back onto the pad. Like if you feel that it's gripping, because you can pull the old stuff back off.
Yeah, and that is the danger with this sort of thing, is that because you're using the same thing that dissolves the shellac, and you're putting so much work into it, you can pull the old stuff off.
And when do you want to rest on this?
When I feel like it.
Oh, so you think that's evaporated enough, and then you just keep going?
Yeah, with this process, because you only put so much on, it usually evaporates pretty quickly, and I can almost kind of keep working the surface.
So you can already see the shine difference compared to the brushed one. So polished and
I start to feel that.
Yeah.
you get. Can you see that? Is that visible?
You can kind of see it. If you go down a bit, like when you put it down, but I think it's still evaporating.
Yeah.
You can kind of see the.
Because you're really pressing that in flat, and
Mm.
it's not just sitting there and evaporating away.
Yeah.
You immediately get a totally different, and it
Yeah.
doesn't take very long to get a nice,
Yeah.
smooth result.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm gonna go over that just one more time because I want to.
Yep.
So enjoy. Because I think we'll just get, with very little time at all, I think we're gonna get a really nice result from this board.
Yeah, nice. Oh.
I'm gonna leave that there.
Costa says hi.
Hi, Costa.
Hi, Costa.
And we'll let that dry a little bit, and I'm going to come back over this section with the wax, so you
Yep.
can see, and these two sections with the wax as well.
Yes, nice.
In the meantime, I'll get you to brush some oil on.
Of course. So what we've got, pale boiled linseed oil.
Yeah.
Added drying agent. So the other linseed oil you can get is the raw
The
linseed
raw
oil.
linseed oil.
So why
which
would you
is
get the
pretty
one-
much what comes straight from the linseed itself?
Why would you get
Turn that around for a loop.
is that wait, hold on. Why would you get the one with the drying agents?
The
You still haven't got there.
Just missed it. Yeah. That's good.
the main reason. Oh, that feels so nice. The main reason is that the linseed oil naturally will dry through a chemical interaction with the air, but that
Yeah.
process on its own takes almost 2 weeks in some cases to really dry, or longer.
Yeah.
Whereas they added some metals that speed up that process.
Yeah.
Can you open that?
Yeah, I'll pass it off.
Luke's strong.
Yeah.
Luke will do it.
Just gotta put it on.
Can you do it?
As well.
Yeah, it's easy.
But just the raw linseed oil seems more appealing because it is more natural, and you can put it on your it's food safe. Is that stuff food safe? No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, everything is food safe.
Everything is.
Everything is.
Oh.
I be wary, but food safe. The reason food safe I think came about, and I'm not 100% certain on this, but this is my understanding,
Yeah.
is the same reason that lead paint got banished. Lead paint was made out of linseed oil. That's the hardening thing in lead paint, and they'd add lead to it as a dryer to make it dry faster, and then it would have lead in it.
Yep.
Same with linseed oil. So linseed oil with dryers before the 70s had lead in it, so it was definitely not safe and not good to put on anything. Pretty much most things now are, you could probably eat them if you wanted to. I don't
Sure.
recommend it. You do eat some of them.
Yeah.
You've eaten shellac, almost certainly.
Right.
It goes
It's
on
in
some
lollies.
candies, yeah.
Yeah.
You've eaten wax, it goes on the exterior of some candies as well.
Right.
I have a cutting board at home that's made out of polyurethane, so obviously that has some safeness. So food safe is something I'm a little skeptical of.
Oh, really? Okay.
But if you want to be safe, raw linseed oil is going to be.
Does it
a
not
better
perform
option.
as good as this?
It performs great. It just takes a really long time to harden.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and in that chance, there's a risk that it'll collect dust from the air, or do other sorts of weird things.
And there's oil brushes as well.
So I've got these oil brushes here that you can use.
Sure.
And with the oil, like he said before, it kind of soaks in. So you can actually be excessive with it. Oil is something, if you're at home and you're really nervous about some of these other things that we've done, oil is something that is really easy to get wrong, which is nice.
Right. Okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, so Ash will prove that anyone can do it.
Whoa! That was rude.
I'm sorry. That was very mean. Because I know you can actually finish very well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember that. Okay.
But the thing is, you put it on and it soaks in, like we talked about a couple weeks
Just a bit
ago.
to there. Yeah, that's it.
So these brushes obviously aren't as nice as your camel hair, though. We'll just
Yeah, and because they don't need to be, because what we're going to do is we're going to oversaturate the surface
oversaturate.
with the oil, so you can almost pour it on,
Oofed.
and it's suddenly very beautiful. Leave that to sit for a little bit, and then you could just use a cloth to wipe off that.
So what's a little bit?
For the purposes of Facebook Live, we'll leave it for about 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
Um,
Yeah, look at that. Far out.
But not for the purposes of Facebook Live.
but not for the purposes of Facebook Live. I probably wouldn't leave it that much longer.
Yeah, really.
For your first coat, I would pretty much wipe off the excess immediately.
Okay.
Because any finish, as I briefly touched on before, will be more solid and better quality the thinner it's applied. So multiple thin coatings will always yield a better result than thicker ones.
And so could you buff the oil as well?
Yeah, so after this, with almost any of these, you could even come back and sand them again
Yeah.
if you wanted to and clear that off and go again.
So you meant to sand between coats. That seems like a thing which you meant to do with lots of things.
You don't have to.
Okay.
You just will get, if you're after a really high shine or a really clean surface, you can do that. Or if it's, say, this oil has completely cured, you're coming back to it a month later, or it's really properly cured, then you might need to sand it to give the new coat some key, something to grab onto.
Wax?
Wax. I've got a wax here. This is my favorite because this one's kind of gooey. So this one's really soft. Here's another wax. This is kind of. This is your homemade beeswax, right?
Yep. It is.
Yeah. So this is just beeswax with some turpentine that's been softened up. And this is a company-made one that's got some other oils and softening agents in it as well. Waxes will be made out of a few different things. I'm going to use this one right now, not because I like it better, but because it's softer and easier for me to do at the moment.
Move the wax thing out of the way.
You see, this one's really soft.
Oh, yeah, nice.
So there's quite a bit more terps in that, which makes it really easy to apply. But that will eventually evolve, dissolve, as I said before, and then it'll be nice and hard. And this is pretty much like boot polish.
Yeah.
You're applying it the same way. We're going to wipe it in, and that's actually a lot.
So you would do this though after you're finishing off all your shellacking after however many coats you want to do.
Yeah.
So the person who texted in earlier, with that,
Jennifer.
after a clean, perhaps you could just put the final wax on
In some cases, depending on how patchy it is, you can just put a wax over it, and it might just solve the problem.
Yeah.
So I put that wax in.
Because it fills gaps, it still polishes as well.
Yeah, it resaturates the whole surface.
Yeah.
So that wax is in there. And we'll let that sit while that solvent evaporates, and then we'll come back just like with your shoes.
Sure.
You put it on, you let it sit, and then you come back and you buff the surface.
And come back after
5 minutes, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Anything in that realm?
Yeah.
I found that.
Sure.
In this case, I'm going to come back at it now.
Yeah. And then should I come back at this now?
Yeah, how's that? That's still going to be very wet. That's going to take a couple hours. All your oils are always going to take.
Right. A couple of hours and you do a couple of coats on this oil.
You could do a wax finish on its own on a piece. Like if you wanted, if it was a very rustic or vernacular piece, it was a farm thing, just a wax coating will be all right. So, what can we see, Luke, in the differences between these? So here is...
tilt them a little bit more towards the camera so we get that glare off. That's good. Now let me get there.
On the end here?
Yep.
So here we've got linseed oil, one coat wiped back, and that's going to dry over time. We've got raw timber here. I don't think we're going to do poly today. It's not very exciting.
But poly, I wonder if we could touch on that real quick.
We could talk a little bit about
Because
it.
varnish, you go into Bunnings or similar type shops,
Yeah.
and varnishes are everywhere. Particularly on the home decking.
Varnish.
But which is referring to a polyurethane, would you say?
Often, if you're buying it at a store and you're buying a varnish, it's probably a polyurethane mixed with a linseed oil or another type of drying oil, and then that gets applied. So you've got that oil soaking in, and you've also got a resin that sits on the surface. So that's what most of your varnishes will be. The terminology gets used.
And a lot of your oils, as you've said, like your Danish oils, they have some polyurethane in them.
Yeah, so a Danish oil, a Scandinavian oil will probably have polyurethane in them and oil.
And just one thing that I've found with this sort of trial and error is that using some polyurethanes, finding them to be painful, and wanting to remove them afterwards, and having a lot of difficulty with that.
Yeah.
Because they sit on the surface and it's hard to get it all back again.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important is that a lot of the way the industry has gone in two directions. One, for professionals who are finishing things in a professional shop, or doing, your floors in your houses or something. A lot of finishes are designed for floors and not necessarily for furniture. And a lot of it is designed to be fast and easy. Whereas fast and easy, like say with food, doesn't yield the best result. Really good food comes from, working carefully and thoughtfully. And when I'm at home, I want to cook carefully and thoughtfully to get the best result.
Sure.
And I think finishing is the same. If you're careful and thoughtful, you yield a better result with some of these basic materials
Mm.
than trying to buy something that
Yeah.
is designed for industry or designed for quick and cheap.
Did you come back at this?
Yeah, I did buff it back a little bit. We can buff it back even more.
Yeah, and so you don't buff in circles again?
No,
Like
you
did
can.
with the-
You can.
Yep.
You just always want to finish with those long strokes, whatever you do.
Shellac.
So anyway, can we get back to?
Sure can.
I don't know if you can see the difference. I don't know how well you can see the differences between these.
Yeah, if you could tip it up a little bit more towards the camera just to take the
Yeah.
glare off it.
But generally, that's your shellac, just shellac. So it's got a
So
bit of wax on the
this
edges.
is. Let's start. with- I
It
think
is
we're panning
rather
this.
difficult to see on the camera, but
Yeah.
yeah, go through it anyway.
Just here is just a wax finish and nothing else, which
Yep.
has a good sheen, but
Yeah,
not
yeah.
a high amount of protection.
Yeah.
Here is
okay.
the shellac with the wax on it, which is the highest sheen for what
Mm.
we've done so far.
Mm.
Here's the wax that's just polished in, or the shellac that's just polished
Yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
which has got a good.
Keep,
got a
keep
nice
tilting
feel.
it towards the camera.
And what's
Yeah,
the benefit
beautiful.
of having the wax on the shellac versus not having the wax?
The wax on the shellac, the shellac protects the wood, and then
Yeah.
the wax protects the shellac, and
Nice.
it also adds a nice, like just a higher polish
Right.
finish.
Yeah.
And then your last one is your brush shellac.
Sure. What about from wine and food and things?
So obviously, because shellac dissolves in alcohol,
Yeah.
if you spill whiskey on it, you'll have a whiskey stain. So use toasters.
Yeah.
But most of these are going to be very similar when it comes to a lot of other stuff. Wax.
The
and
wax will
linseed
break
oil-
down in whiskey as well.
The wax won't break down in whiskey as much.
Mm.
Wax and linseed oil are the weakest of the finishes.
Right.
Shellac is slightly stronger than the two
Sure.
of them, and then obviously your industrial, your oil poly blends or your oil
Mm.
resin blends are the most durable. However, I think it's important with a lot of your pieces of furniture to think about how durable you actually need that to be.
Yeah.
I have a dining table at
I was
home.
about to say, what about a dining tabletop? Because I'm sure everyone would like to sort of know what to do with that.
So I think, and I'm still learning so much. Like this is all sorts of stuff I'm excited to tell you because I've learned it recently. But I think I'm starting to be a bit skeptical about some of the concerns that we have.
Mm.
My dining table at home was flat pack, and it's a soft pine, and it's got I think like one thin coat of a not very durable oil on it,
Mm.
and it looks fine.
Yeah.
Like it's held up really well,
Yeah.
and I abused the crap out of it.
Right.
So I do wonder sometimes how much we worry about how super durable our finishes are going to be. I think if you just kind of clean surfaces regularly, they tend to do pretty
What
well.
about a quick summary? We have 5 minutes to go
Yeah.
of how someone could determine what surfaces on the say their dining table.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the quick ones, if you get a little bit of metho and you
Mm.
put it in a small, inconspicuous spot and it goes tacky, that's a pretty good sign that it's shellac.
Right.
And that'll tell you pretty quickly if it's shellac or if it's something that dissolves in alcohol, which will be treated the same way.
Would they
anyway.
have stopped using shellac a lot in the 60s or something?
It was still used pretty heavily up to about the 60s,
Hmm.
but it's still used today.
Okay, right.
If you've got something that's got a really thick plasticky coating on it that's
Right.
probably gone a little yellow or creamy, that's really brittle, that's a sprayed lacquer,
Right.
and that's
And to get that
really
off, you have to remove it all, right? Scrape it all back.
That-
Sand it in.
yeah. You can rework it a little bit, but it's going to be a lot easier to try and scrape that all off.
That went fast. That was great.
Yeah, like I said, he was wondering whether or not I'd be able to talk about this. For
Yeah,
an hour.
that was good. Well done. That was good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could have done more.
Yeah, but I think we only have a couple of minutes to go. But
Yeah, I think we should definitely talk about refinishing and cleaning up old furniture soon.
yeah.
I think that would be a really good
Yeah.
one.
But the one-to-one sessions, I'd be if this has piqued anyone's interest. They're even running this up, aren't they? Or do you
Yeah,
start
it's
bookings,
electrical
or-
this
Oh, it
afternoon.
is.
In 2 weeks, there will be a woodworking one.
Right.
Next week is bikes. Stu and Kieran. So last week we had Bicycle Garden, and next week we got our own team.
Oh, nice.
Stu and Kieran.
Yeah.
They're gonna be having a big day. They've got 2 council sessions and 1 live session. So that's
Wow.
gonna be really that's
Nice.
gonna be cool.
What councils are they?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Oh,
But
wow.
good
That's
question.
really interesting.
Excellent,
Okay.
From the Greater Sydney region.
Great.
Yeah, something in the yeah.
But yeah, come check out the Bower if anyone still hasn't logged out yet. Come to the Bower, come to the shop in Merrifield. It's great. Try find a piece of furniture at home that you want to fix up, and get a consultation. So
Yeah, get in touch. And we also do repairs here, and you can come and talk to us about what you need done if it gets too much for you.
And classes are starting again at some point soon, aren't they?
Yeah, we've got in-person classes starting at the end of September.
Right.
And then we've got some online ones, including an online finishing course, which is going to be very similar to this, but
Right.
4 1-hour sessions. So it goes way more in depth,
Oh,
and you'll get to
great.
practice at home
Nice.
as well. So
I might do that.
yeah, it's going to be fun.
Mm.
I'm going to do it.
Nice. Good teaching.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Luke?
That's it.
No. Good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all very much. Yeah.
Likewise.
See you next time.
All right, take
Thanks,
care.
Ash.